Outer Wilds is the kind of game that people will tell you is best experienced knowing absolutely nothing about. It's a game rooted in discovery, so open and indiscriminate that a new player can spend hours struggling to understand what the point of it all is, while repeat playthroughs can be completed in a matter of a few minutes. How it does this is by challenging the way video games have been designed for decades. It doesn't present you with clearly defined goals and failure states. There aren't levels that begin and end in the traditional sense. There really aren't even any skill checks gating your progress. In place of all of that are pure knowledge checks. You can go anywhere and do anything you want within the game's realm of possibilities at any point in your adventure, as long as you can recall the information needed to progress. This should be enough to convince you to at least try Outer Wilds before learning more about it, because your initial playthrough is literally a once-in-a-lifetime experience, one you can never relive without completely scrubbing your memory of it. And yet, you're here. Surely many who will watch this video to completion have already completed Outer Wilds, but I'm willing to bet that you, the person I wish to speak to directly, saw the thumbnail, the title, and wondered how a single game could elicit a more visceral reaction from me than any other, shaking me to the fabric of my core. Before my playthrough of Outer Wilds, I was in that exact position. I looked around to see all of my friends, people I have the utmost respect for, praise the game as if each of them had a profoundly irreplicable experience, and I wanted to understand why. What I did understand then is the problem that comes with trying to get someone to play your favorite game while refusing to actually tell them anything about it, whether intended or not. Presenting it this way puts it on a pedestal, inevitably coloring others' expectations in one way or another. Luckily, the Outer Wilds community is pretty respectful, and I never once felt pressured into playing something I wasn't all that interested in understanding. However, this begs the question, why present Outer Wilds in this way if you wish for others to play it without expectation? Well, that's simply because this, whatever this is, isn't any more for you than it is for me. This game spoke to me on a deeply personal level, in a way I can really only convey by sharing the full story. As such, instead of being a purely analytical piece, the purpose of this video is to share the narrative of my experience from beginning to end, and I can't do that without spoiling the game. Because of that, I've decided to chapter this video in a way that past versions of myself could enjoy, each part containing a varying degree of spoilers. This is part 1. For the me that wanted a reason to begin Outer Wilds free from spoilers. So where does that leave us? Well, I think if you're still here, interested enough in the game to want to know what I think about it without having tried it yourself, at least try knowing this. There's something to gain from Outer Wilds for everyone. Just know that it likely won't be easy, because Outer Wilds challenges you to learn a new language independent from the common language of video games gamers have spoken for decades. Go with an open mind. Learn, and come back, whether you've succeeded or failed. The following part 2 is for the me who failed. The first thing I noticed about Outer Wilds is the fact that the end goal is never clearly defined. Instead of outwardly telling or showing the player what their motivation should be, the introduction to Outer Wilds challenges the player to find their own motivation. For some, it might be to simply explore neighboring planets, while for others, it might be a desire to understand why a statue reacted in such a strange way to their presence. For me, it was to learn more about and hopefully put a stop to this. But not before doing a bit of exploring. After learning what I could from some of the various exhibits of natural phenomena dotted across Timberhearth, I gathered the launch codes from Hornfels and began my first launch. It was actually pretty uneventful, briefly exploring the Addle Rock before returning to Timberhearth, stumbling upon the Dark Bramble Seed, and exploring Mining Site 2B until the sun exploded. My second launch went about as well as one could expect. Naturally, like any sane person would, I headed straight to Dark Bramble after discovering the seed and, well... At that moment, I didn't really know what I was thinking or what I believed the game was trying to tell me, but I swore myself off from exploring Dark Bramble any further because it represented everything I hated about media-induced fear. I don't play horror games, or even just games with scary elements for that matter. even if a game markets itself as something different while including a few horror-adjacent elements, I become extremely anxious at the thought of ever having to play it, because I vehemently hate being scared. When I believe a movie is about to try to scare me, I give in to the natural impulse to cover my eyes. When I worked at a movie theater, I began to sweat every time I had to clean a theater that housed a horror movie while the credits were still rolling. Anytime I was coerced by friends into joining them for the local amusement park's Halloween celebration, I was filled with this irrational sense of dread that one of the paid actors would eventually reach out and grab me. So I always placed myself in the middle of my friend group. All the while, I knew this was a me thing, or as I like to call it, me being an absolute bitch. Because at the end of all of these activities, I usually ended up feeling pretty good. After watching a slew of classic scary movies with friends, I realized there's more to the genre than just farming cheap scares. After braving a haunted house, I enjoyed feeling the relief that comes from facing a fear before talking shit about all the actors with my friends. And well, maybe I didn't ever really enjoy cleaning theaters, but the point is, with a little bit of social pressure, I can enjoy doing the scary thing. Video games are a bit different though. I don't usually find myself sitting down with friends to play a horror game. And in the rare instance that I do, it's almost painful to perform any action in the game because of how much more active and participatory the experience is. Just know that if anyone asks me to play Phasmophobia, I'm gonna be parking my bitch ass in the truck because I can. It's not even the act of being jump scared that prevents me from moving forward. It's the sense of dread that comes with knowing that something is coming. This well of anxiety ready to burst at any moment. I'm a very risk-averse person, so when given the choice to play a game that will leave me feeling unbearably anxious for upwards of 10 to 20 hours, I'll leave it on the shelf and simply play something else. Everything about Dark Bramble left me feeling this way. The unsettling music, or lack thereof, the prickly thorns, the dense fog that shrouded my biggest fear until I crept too close to get away. It's suffocating. In hindsight, the presence of anglerfish makes perfect sense, because Dark Bramble is everything I imagine the ocean deep must be like. Suffocating, both literally and figuratively, with the only spark of hope begging you to follow into certain doom. A doom I found fruitless to explore. So I didn't. I made a choice, much like every player must do after following a thread that eventually goes cold, to explore the rest of the solar system. However, my choice was largely based on fear. I ended up streaming my next few play sessions on Twitch, and it went about as well as one could expect.
Pretty great. Oh, fuck!
After a few brief expeditions surveying the remaining planets, I settled on exploring the Hourglass Twins, subsequently discovering warp travel by sheer accident, followed by this.
Let's go back. Whoa! Wait! Wait, what's happening? Wait, what the? No! No! Dude, I don't understand. No! No! Okay, I know what's happening. I know. My ship! No!
What felt like an insignificant discovery to me was huge in hindsight. I just stumbled into the high-energy lab without any knowledge of its existence, but its information made so little sense to me. Even though I had no idea what I was actually looking at, I craved more. By this point, I was having fun again, sharing whatever nonsense I could get into with my Twitch audience. But as I became more comfortable with the laws of physics and familiar with the planets of the solar system, the novelty of encountering its natural oddities began to subside as I began to seek something, anything, to push the story forward. This led me to Giant's Deep, my first of many brick walls. Navigating its tower of quantum knowledge gave me more trouble than I'd like to admit. Up until this puzzle, I was able to walk away from any situation that left me feeling stumped. But as I progressed further through the tower, I realized there was no going back. Observing a quantum object. Observing an image of a quantum object. These are the same. These words raced through my mind, unable to parse any meaning. I was stuck. The solution is simple enough in hindsight, as long as you become familiar with your equipment and have encountered any of the other quantum shards scattered throughout the solar system. But that's the thing about Outer Wilds. Where another game may have gated off progression with a key found in another location, in Outer Wilds, the key is simply how your brain processes information. My brain doesn't work very well under stress, and the more stressed I became at the thought of forever being stuck in this godforsaken tower, made it impossible to clear the fog in my mind. That would explain why I forgot I could meditate until the next loop or just wait for the sun to explode, but let's not talk about that. I was so frustrated. Had I not been streaming, I may have felt a little less pressed to quickly uncover the solution, but even then, I just as easily could have exited the game in frustration. It certainly wouldn't be the last time I would do that. With a little bit of nudging from experienced players in chat, I eventually understood what the game was trying to tell me. And once the rule of quantum imaging clicked, I was able to easily apply it to the following puzzles. I had overcome a huge hurdle, but because I wasn't able to solve it by myself, the victory felt hollow, almost embarrassing. This was really only the beginning of my woes in the Outer Wilds. In a later session, I discovered how to break through the ocean current of Giant's Deep after attempting some other more creative methods of reaching its core. I was ecstatic, plunging below the surface and nothing. Another wall, with which the impact was devastating. Following that failure, I made my first landing on the quantum moon, but without full understanding of the 3 rules of quantum knowledge, that trail went cold. After that, I discovered the anglerfish fossil on Ember Twin, learning that they did have a weakness to exploit. But instead of responding with elation, all I could do was shiver and sulk away in cowardice. I was beginning to grow so tired of these investigative threads going cold after taking me on this roller coaster ride of discovery followed by disappointment again and again, unable to find links between any of the information. And this all came to a head after my discovery on the interloper. I had discerned that an entrance to the depths of the comet existed somewhere on its sunward side. After finally combing nearly every inch of its surface from front to back to no avail, I began to grow restless. It was that same restless, anxious feeling I felt on Giant's Deep, where I could only imagine the portion of my brain responsible for critical thinking stopped giving a shit in favor of allowing my fight or flight response to take over, considering a flight from this fucking game. And as I sat there, twiddling my thumbs on the verge of giving up, the ice beneath my feet began to sink. Oh my god. I plunged below the surface, heart racing as I swiftly navigated around clusters of deadly ghost matter in its maze-like corridors. I thought to myself, surely there is something down here, something that will help explain what any of this means. There has to be something. But much to the dismay of the Nomai before me, within the interloper's core was nothing but despair. The question answered, sure, but not the answer I so desperately sought. I wasn't used to games challenging me in this way. Like, I love Breath of the Wild. I love how open-ended the experience is. I loved having the freedom to complete its objectives in whichever order I chose. But unlike Outer Wilds, in Breath of the Wild, there was always this light at the end of the tunnel, signifying your progression with tangible reward. Anytime I completed a puzzle, the game rewarded me with a spirit orb or Korok seed. Outer Wilds, on the other hand, never really gave me that pat on the back I was looking for. The closest thing I got to a tangible reward in Outer Wilds appeared in the ship log, and my stubborn ass didn't realize how crucial the rumor board would be until over halfway through my playthrough. I really wanted to stop playing after my discovery on the interloper. I'd like to chalk it up as a consequence of my unfortunate pathing, as the motivations of the Nomai were not revealed to me until rather late in my playthrough. But my improper mindset is a more likely explanation for my struggle to understand and enjoy this game. I at least needed a break, a chance to recalibrate, so I put Outer Wilds down for several weeks. What I didn't think about then, only realizing after taking some time to process everything that just happened while discussing with others, was that my reward for uncovering the destruction of the Nomai wasn't necessarily the revelation itself, but the forethought to approach the rest of the solar system under the consideration of the passage of time, as the way forward into the interloper was only revealed as a consequence of it traveling too close to the sun. It's truly an incredible feat of game design. In a game world that makes you feel infinitesimally small to an overwhelming, no, an existential degree, the constraint of not space, but time is what makes it all manageable. You know, time, the thing we all wish we had significantly more of. As it turns out, when I'm trying to uncover a mystery spanning across a solar system with immeasurable possibilities, having less time is the only thing that got me through it all. I've been conditioned by games to expect immediate gratification. Time is used all the time in games, but usually as a measurement of one's ability to complete an objective or solve a puzzle as quickly as possible. It usually instills tension, not tranquility. You think there's so much goddamn waiting in Ocarina? Yeah, well, there's a whole lot more waiting in Outer Wilds, and it's the most interesting implementation of waiting in a video game I've ever had the pleasure of experiencing. By drip-feeding you information like mismatched pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, Outer Wilds has a way of making you feel pretty dumb for a while before making you feel like a damn genius all at once. The Interloper was my turning point. Everything I had gone through, the anxiety, the frustration, the letdowns, were all just a part of the learning process. There was certainly still more to learn, but it was now time for application. It was through this application that everything began to finally click. The Nomai's search for the Eye of the Universe, the primitive Hearthian's aquatic survival, the statues powered by the Ash Twin Project. I shouted out in triumph after discovering the rule of the mysterious 6th location, completing my own pilgrimage to the Quantum Moon, something I so desperately wanted to understand from the very beginning. It was the first big discovery that felt entirely my own with this new approach. After I emerged from the temple into this new, unrecognizable environment, this wave of overwhelming satisfaction rushed over me. Even though the knowledge gained from reaching the 6th location didn't exactly give me many leads to move forward, instead of feeling let down, much like to the Nomai themselves, being so close, yet so far from the eye felt so relieving. It really put into perspective exactly how far I had come from the first time I landed there, knowing almost nothing. There was just one problem. As the light of all of my other leads began to dim, there was but one remaining that only grew brighter over the course of my entire playthrough. The light of the anglerfish. Everything was leading me back to Dark Bramble, Feldspar's signal, the anglerfish fossil. My heart sank when I learned of the Nomai vessel's crash landing and its escape pod's failure to flee the thicket. Had I known what was ahead of me from the beginning, I don't know that I would have ever gotten this far, but I couldn't just stop now. Not after everything I accomplished. This time I had all the tools I needed. As I entered the thicket for the first time in 20+ hours of play with all the acquired knowledge I could possibly need, that same wave of fear and despair ran cold over me, strangling me. I could hear nothing but the ominous tone of an unknown shroud billowing in every which way. It was paralyzing. And yet, as I gracefully drifted with nothing but the gleeful tune of Feldspar's harmonica cutting through the dense fog to lead me, something about the voyage felt oddly tranquil. It surely had something to do with the fact that there were no anglerfish in my way to speak of, but more importantly, having that tune to guide me brought me back to reality in a way, like a degree of separation between myself and full immersion with my fear would. It was the same degree of separation found by taking off my headphones, covering my eyes with my hands, or reaching out for the touch of a friend in a haunted maze. But instead of breaking my immersion with the game, it was baked into the experience itself. I felt more in control of the situation. Still tense, to be sure, but that hopeless despair that creeped to every corner of my mind the moment I thought about re-entering Dark Bramble slowly began to subside. And sure enough, with a bit of patience, I found exactly what I was looking for. I was overjoyed. Not only did I find another reason to leave, it felt as if the door securing all the possibilities of discovery within the thicket was blown wide open. In a shocking twist, I was eager to explore the house of horrors I had originally sworn myself away from. This time, I was ready to face my biggest fear square in the face. I was still scared, and I may have gotten eaten a few times, but with each subsequent attempt to proceed, the fear diminished, and it wasn't long before I was launching myself from my ship into the belly of the beast, untethered from my last degree of separation. It was incredible. I thought it was over after I reached the vessel. I made it. I had the coordinates. I was ready to enter the Eye of the Universe. But rather predictably, there was one more piece of the puzzle missing. It was at that moment I promised myself I would not quit until the mystery was solved. There was just one more roller coaster left to ride. After reviewing all of my information, there were only 2 possible leads left, both evading my grasp for so long. I knew the advanced warp core rested within Ash Twin. I knew there was no conventional way inside. Warp was the only possibility. The glyphs within the lab proved it. While I couldn't align Ash Twin with itself, I knew that if the Ash Twin warp tower aligned with Ember Twin, I should be able to reach the core, as each were but 2 parts of a whole celestial body. But whenever the twins were properly aligned, the damn sand would drag me away from the warp platform. The solution, a clue, anything, should be in the Sun Station. After all, everything seemed to point back to the Sun Station. It was impossible to miss. It had to be the reason for all of this mess in the first place. But for as long as I knew that warp to it was possible, its entry eluded me. I sat on the Ash Twin sand, observing the sun tower for what was likely my 5th attempt at brute forcing my way through the pincushions that withheld the secrets of the universe from me without a care in the world, before shouting in relief for what was the loudest but assuredly not the last time. I imagine that the feelings felt following my arrival must have been felt by countless other players before me. There were no clues, no hidden knowledge regarding the Ash Twin project. The only secret the Sun Station revealed was the failure of the greedy Nomai, and that all their efforts must have been for nothing. After everything I'd been through, the sun was always going to supernova. I was so angry, more angry than I was in the interloper, no closer to the Ash Twin project than I ever was. The eye was my last hope, but I was stuck again. So close, yet so damn far from the answers I sought for so long. Ever since the interloper, every small victory was completely my own, and I took so much pride in that. Having to ask for help was so defeating, but I was desperate. I gave in, holding on to that same shameful feeling I had all the way back in the Quantum Tower on Giant's Deep, asking the very same friend that saved me all that time ago. Every clue I just recited to you, I recited back to him, and what I received in response was probably the last thing I could have expected at that moment.
You already know how to get to the Ash Twin project. Fight your instincts.
With nothing left to lose, I saddled up for one last loop. Fight your instincts. I examined the Ash Twin warp tower from head to toe. Fight your instincts. I noticed an alcove I could seek refuge from the sandstorm in.
Fight your instincts.
I waited for what felt like ages for the one shot I had.
Fight your instincts.
Without hesitation, I gunned it and took a leap of faith.
Fight your instincts!
Oh my god, it actually worked! In pure and utter shock, I scoured the chamber for any last bits of information I could potentially need before heading out. And there it was. Everything I had naturally deduced from every puzzle, every word wall, every projection stone, every planet. The comet, the Sun Station's failure, its construction, the statues, the probe cannon, the warp core. It was all there, and so validating to see it all in writing, I almost forgot why I sought it in the first place. There was only one thing left to do. Without hesitation, I grabbed the warp core. And with the surge of a familiar tune, I emerged from beneath the sand to begin what would likely be my final voyage. In an effort to describe how it felt, I'm going to use not my own words, but the words of a dear friend I could not agree more with. That final hour shared with Outer Wilds was the best single hour of a video game I've ever experienced. In 25 hours of playtime, I never once felt more sure of what I needed to do until this moment, propelling straight to Dark Bramble with confidence, cutting through the fog with grace and precision, jettisoning my body from my craft for the last time without a shred of fear or consideration of the consequences, reaching the command room of the vessel with swiftness, fitting the warp core and inputting the coordinates as if I were the captain of this ship all along. And then there it was. I don't know why, but I expected something different. This wasn't enlightening. It was quite the opposite, in fact, but there was nothing left to do but continue. I pressed forward with a fear so intense, my heart rate must have eclipsed that which I experienced on my first voyage into Dark Bramble. But simultaneously with a relief so extreme, tears began to stream down my face. I leapt. I don't know how else to describe the ensuing events, but by describing the emotions I felt. Strength, fear, tranquility, anxiety, love, hate, yin and yang. It didn't make any sense until it was all said and done. When I hit the credits, I wept. And as I wept, I finally realized, oh my God, this game just reflected back all of the pain I've held on to for 12 years. Hey, so I'm going to share something deeply personal with you, okay? I know it's probably weird to see me in front of the camera like this, and trust me, I don't really want to make a habit of this because I don't like being in front of the camera. But the reason I'm doing this is because as I was working on this video, I was trying to find the best way to explain what I'm about to tell you. Voiceover like I normally do just didn't feel right because that is inherently performative. That's why I'm in front of the camera, because I want you to know that there is nothing performative about this. This is just me in front of the camera talking directly to you. So just as a warning, things might get a little uncomfortable as I say this. My mom has fought cancer for 12 years. In that time, she's undergone plenty of surgeries, radiation treatment, and just a lot of chemotherapy. I've been dealing with this for the better half of my life. I'm 26, and I think I was around 13 or 14 when we learned of the emergence of her condition. And since then, it's been a struggle for all of us, especially for my mom. And she has fought so fucking hard against this cancer. I sincerely believe that my mom is the strongest person that I know, because not only did she fight cancer for 12 years, she also did it while working as a teacher and providing for our family. Not only that, but without my mom, I don't know that I would still be here, because she has helped me through so much. Oh my God. I was certainly too young to really understand the gravity of the situation when I first learned of it, back when I was 13, 14, a kid. But the way I was able to deal with it was through hope. There was this hope that one day everything would eventually return to normal and she would get better. That's what the treatments provided. They provided hope. Unfortunately, there's not much hope left. And that's because the chemotherapy isn't really helping as much as it once did. Her body is tired. And because of that, she recently made a decision. And that decision was to stop chemotherapy and any other treatments and transition from regular medical care to hospice. So if you don't know what hospice care is, it's different from regular medical care. Hospice is when you stop treating a patient and instead you begin to focus on providing comfort and quality of life for the terminally ill. Ever since she told me that she was transitioning to hospice and no longer continuing treatment, I've had this dread lingering over me. And I just kind of feel like numb in a way. Because what that means is that there's not any more hope. I'm scared, and there's so many things that I don't know, and I'm not even sure knowing would even help. Like, I don't know how much time we have left right now, and I don't know what her condition is going to look like in the near future. Needless to say, I'm fucking sad, and I'm scared because I just have to go on every day and try to enjoy the time that we have left. I've had to deal with loss before, but nothing like this, because I love my mom so much. I can't even begin to describe what it feels like to have to prepare for the loss of somebody that has been a part of your life since the moment you were born. The thought of her being gone is something I have to confront every day because I live with her and I'm trying to do everything that I can to make her life a little bit easier, whether it's cooking meals or just cleaning up or just being there for her. And it's fucking hard sometimes, but there is no place I would rather be. And I'm sitting in front of you telling you this when this is something I don't even want to tell my closest friends. Like, I've just dealt with this and held on to this for over a decade of my life. I didn't want to give my friends that lens into my life because I didn't want them to think that I was miserable and I didn't want to dump that trauma onto them. And so it was easier to just put on a face. And here I am in front of an audience of God knows how many, and I'm putting this out there. And that may seem crazy, and trust me, I'm fucking terrified. But the reason that I'm doing this now is the same reason why I make videos. And that's because I believe that putting myself out there in a vulnerable way and talking about my life experience, I believe that can help somebody. I want to believe that that can help somebody. I don't even know if this is the best or even a good way of dealing with this. But I'm doing so because after I played Outer Wilds, I just felt heard without having to say anything. Everything from my fear, frustration, and anger to my perseverance, relief, and hope, playing Outer Wilds felt like watching all my experiences being played back to me. Entering the actual planetary cancer that is Dark Bramble was like learning of the emergence of her condition. There were so many unknowns, and my fear froze me in my tracks. Instead of trying to understand it and how to move forward, I ran away and tried to do something, anything, to keep myself from dwelling on the possibilities. But no matter how far I tried to run, whether it was a little ways away from home or across the solar system, it was always in view. I had to go back and face it all along. All of my incredible discoveries that led me to believe I was onto something greater, laced with setbacks, were like every sprinkle of new hope. We caught this early enough to prevent further damage, just one more surgery, more radiation, another year of chemotherapy. But after it all, it still won't stop. When will it stop fighting back? The discovery of the Sun Station was like learning that all this treatment and fighting would never truly defeat the cancer. It was merely delaying the inevitable. And every time the sun exploded, it was like daydreaming into my dark future before the scorching pain sent me back to reality. Every cycle spent trying to stop an unstoppable force of nature was like waking up every day believing that if I just hoped, if I just prayed hard enough, it would all go away. The eye revealed something very powerful to me. There are copious amounts of loss all around me every day. Every dying star is the collapse of someone else's world, just like mine, that I cannot even comprehend. And the only thing that can truly make one cognizant of the full brunt of that collapse is the death of their own star. But you don't have to deal with that loss alone. I can rest a little bit easier, knowing that when the time comes, I have people to lean on, and some of them will be leaning on me. That's why I'm here. This is what I do. This is what I can do. If you're dealing with a loss, preparing for a loss, or remembering the loss you've overcome, I hear you and I love you. Lean on this message. Lean on me a little, will ya? Outer Wilds spoke to me in a beautifully profound way, but I know this game wasn't made just for me. My interpretation of the message it's trying to convey is but one of many others in a galaxy full of experiences reflecting the thoughts, struggles, and desires of its players back at them. I think that is what Outer Wilds does best. It gave me a platform to face my fear, not with any immediacy, but by building up my confidence one piece of dialogue, one word wall, one discovery at a time. Finding the fear in an unlikely place was the only way I'd be willing to face it. And I have Outer Wilds to thank for that. Outer Wilds and subsequently all the friends and peers that either gave me tips or just encouraged me along the way helped me overcome my stubbornness and shame of asking for help. After all of the knowledge and technical prowess demonstrated by the Nomai was collaborative in the first place. I wouldn't be shocked to hear that completing Outer Wilds was a collaborative process for many of its players. Outer Wilds helped remind me that a little adversity can make the reward at the end all the more sweeter and satisfying. It's hard not to look back at my struggles and laugh from the perspective of hindsight, but I can also appreciate the determination I was able to muster to finish what I started. All of this is what I meant when I said everyone has something to gain from Outer Wilds. At its core, it presents players with a reality so frightening and ego-shattering that it has a way of provoking that introspection we all need. It puts into perspective how infinitesimally small we all are, how little each of our lives matter within the grand scheme that is everything with a capital E. But in doing so, it encourages us to find precious value in what we do have right now. When our solar system eventually dies, we'll all be gone. But until then, we are survived by everything that follows us. I don't have the money, the time, or the energy to change the world the way I want to the most. But what I can do is use what I have. My resolve is to use this pain, to use this fear, to use this love, to listen and connect. It's your turn now. What will you say?